In this section, we're going to be building out an HTML JavaScript countdown timer, and we're going to need a few HTML elements within the page. First of all, we need an input area that the user can come and input the date that they want to enter in. So this is the end date that we're going to be using for the counter in order to calculate how much time is left until that selected date. So going in and refreshing it, we're using the HTML5 date input, so just using type date. This gives us the ability to select a date, and we can use that within our JavaScript in order to calculate how much time is left. We also need a visual that we're going to use in order to output the time for the user, and we can call this one clock. So giving it a class of clock, this will be a div, and within this div, we're going to have some spans. So the first span that we have is going to be a class of days. So this is how many days are left until that particular element, or this is how many days are left in the countdown. And we can wrap all of this inside of a span and duplicating this so that we have a visual for hours as well, updating the class so that we have a way to select it. And we can output the word hours for the person using the application. The other parameter that we need is minutes. So just give it a class of minutes, and we can output the value of minutes as well for the user to be able to see the number of minutes. I'll make this bigger since these statements are fairly long. And one last one, and this is going to be how many seconds are left within the countdown. So seconds, and we're just writing that out for the user to be able to see that. Let's shrink this down, refresh our content, and we can see that we've got days, hours, minutes, seconds left until our countdown is completed. So now we need to bring in the JavaScript, and the JavaScript is where all of the magic happens, where we can do all of the calculations in order to account for what those values are. So now let's select our elements. So our main element that we're going to be using is going to be the date. So this is going to be our input, and we only have one input. So selecting that element, this is the end date. We can call it end date using document and query selector. Let's select that input. And if we had more than one input, so right now we only have the one input, but if we had more than one input, we could identify it using the name as well. So this could be end date potentially as the name. So going up here, I'm going to add that in. This is just in case you want to add in any additional inputs so that they don't overlap and that we're always selecting that particular one that we want to use. And console logout end date. And this is just to double check to make sure that we're getting that right input area. So we are. Next, we want to select all of these elements. And the main one that we need to select is the clock. And then from the clock, we can go down and we can select the elements that have the span of hours, minutes, and seconds. So let's select our main element that has the clock. And let's give it a name of clock as well. So document. And selecting the element with the class of clock is the one that we're going to be selecting here. So for classes, we prefix it with a period, the same way we do with CSS. And we want to add in an event listener on the end date element. So whenever that gets changed, then we want to trigger off an event. So we're appending an event listener. The event listener that we're going to use is change. So whenever the value here changes, then we're going to recalculate how much time is left till the end time. And let's set up an anonymous function. I'm going to add in the prevent default. So what this does in JavaScript, this prevents the default action. So in case you have something submitting it, there's a default action sometimes to fields. So this is the way to prevent it. And in this case, it's just an input field, so it's not doing anything when we're changing it. But I'll leave that in there for reference in case you want to use it later on to prevent the default. So coming up in the next lesson, we're going to continue to build out this application, the countdown timer. So for now, go into your editor, open it up, build out the HTML that you're going to need in order to provide the user the interaction screen that they're going to need in order to create the countdown timer. So they're going to need an input, and they're also going to need a view of how many how much time is left before their end date. And then using JavaScript, select those elements into JavaScript objects so that we can make use of them in the upcoming lessons and code.